What we're about to do is impossible. To try and talk about Northumbria in 25 minutes or less. But we'll do what we can. And I got introduced to Northumbrian Community actually by a student when I was in charge of campus ministry at Concordia. And can everybody on the screen hear me all right?
Yes, thumbs up.
Okay. We were doing all sorts of different prayer type things throughout the week with students, and he wanted to organize one for Northumbria. And I said, what is that? Basically, but he helped organize it, and we would meet once a week, Wednesday mornings at the god-awful hour of 7 a.m. In the chapel to experience the Northumbrian experience. Northumbria is a community in Ireland. It's been around, for centuries, but it's monastic in its orientation. And so, true confession, I tend to be a bit of a monastic myself. I'm a oblate with the St. John's community out in Collegeville. And I like this quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who is one of my favorite Lutheran pastors from Germany. He says, the renewal of the church will come from a new type of monasticism, which only has in common with the old an uncompromising allegiance to the Sermon on the Mount. It is high time people banded together to do this. And he did his doctoral research and dissertation writing while living in a Benedictine community. So when you read his book, Life Together, it's a Lutheran version of the Rule of St. Benedict. And the whole idea behind that is in community that we join in prayer. Well, Northumbria is a scattered community. There is a so-called mother house, a retreat center that you can go to. But basically it's a scattered community, and the whole thing, in fact, this business with renewal of new monasticism, it's really the generation, I forget what the label is. What are the 20-year-olds? Y's, Z's, X's, Q's?
X's. I think it's Gen X.
They're 20 right now.
No, Gen X is my daughter who's in her 40s.
Yeah, millennials are 20s and 30s.
Yeah, but there's one below me.
Gen Z?
Gen
went
Gen
X,
Z.
millennial, and then
Z.
Z.
Gen
I knew it was a letter.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Well, Gen Z and millennials are very fascinated with monasticism. In fact, there's a movement taking place in Minneapolis area synod to begin forming congregations around monastic community. And so clusters of people, not huge groups, but just clusters meeting like in homes in monastic community. Well, as we look at that, we want to think in terms of what is it that they do. In Northumbria, they ask these questions. Who is it that you seek? What are you looking for? How then shall we live? Which I think gets missed a lot of times in our communities. We can get how many angels dance on the head of a pin, but I always want to come back and say, so what? What difference does that make? It's a nice theological discussion, but so what? So they ask, how then shall we live? And I love this other question that they raised. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? How do you understand that question? How do we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? We get this image of evangelism. In fact, back in the 70s, when I first started in ministry, we had these big youth gatherings around evangelism. And I had to go to Ann Arbor, Michigan with my youth group and take them out, and we were to stand on street corners and talk to people about, are they saved? Well, in those days, what did I know? All I did was go to a coffee shop. I was not gonna do it. It just felt abusive. But to sing a joyful song, and I've really, as I work with people, especially, I mean, this last 2 weeks, I've had 3 deaths in where I work. But each one was joyful for them. They lived in anticipation. They sang a joyful song. And that really empowers me to see how the gospel works in people's lives. So there's 2 principles of Northumbrian Community. The rule we embrace and keep will be that of availability and vulnerability. And when we were in this community at the campus, that was 2 things we strove for each week. One is availability. In fact, that one has become a guiding principle for me. I was at one point so busy at work that to get an appointment with me, you had to book about 4 or 5 weeks out, because I was solidly booked all the time, not 1 ounce available. And that was very constricting to me. And so Northumbria seeks a balance of life of availability. And that's availability to God and to the people around you. And so we pray for the privilege of availability and the opportunity of availability. And again, not just for God, but for other people. But when you have availability, you carve out times to be present before God. If you talk to people about prayer, what's the number 1 thing they say holds them back? Time, yeah. And so availability is carving out the time, not because somebody makes you do it, but because you're called to it, to be available. Now, in monastic community, the liturgical hours are there, and one could say they're imposed, but everybody's there voluntarily. It's not prescription, it's subscription. I'm here because I choose to be. And so that availability in prayer, either 4 or 6 times a day, makes one available to God. And then praying availability to the stranger. A big tenet of monastic life is hospitality and being available to the stranger. And that stranger can be anybody who shows up in your face. And learning to listen and deal with them along the way. Vulnerability is a huge challenge, because vulnerability can be very threatening. And so in vulnerability in community and vulnerability in prayer. The Lutheran confessions talk about the old languages, mutual conversation and consolation of the brethren. And then I've always added, and the cistern, because it's brothers and sisters community coming together. And Luther lists those under means of grace, a way in which God comes to us. And the visible sign is the community. And so to come together in prayer, we talked about this last week with residents. I have a couple of people that have a real struggle for me to be around. I don't like them. They've made me mad over the years. They've hurt my feelings. I don't want to be around them. That's garbage I'm carrying. And sometimes talking about that in community and having my colleagues challenge me or pray with me or support me, not judge me, but walk with me in that healing process is the kind of vulnerability that Northumbria talks about and that involves the vulnerability before God, which it was very cool in our liturgy this morning. I'm not going to get the words exactly, but Nina can recite them. But it said we included the prayers in the confession, and for the things we don't know about God, forgive us. That's part of the vulnerability.
Oh,
For
and for
God.
sins only you know.
The what?
And for sins only you know.
Yeah, thank you. That really struck me because I can't see what I can't see. Now, in community, other people can see what I can't see, and God speaks through them. And sometimes that hurts, but that's part of the vulnerability. So people who live in the Northumbrian community strive for that kind of vulnerability, which I think is missing in churches today. We went through difficulty with one of our children who was a wild child and took it to the extreme. And where could we go to talk about it? We went to church, we were judged because we're supposed to have a perfect family. And so where can you find those kind of communities of vulnerability? Northumbria says we find it in community and in isolation. So let me just stop for a minute. Any thoughts or comments? We live in a world that is very individualized. I went to my granddaughter's choir concert the other night, which was magnificent. And I came out and the lobby was filled with people, all sitting around waiting for the kids to come out, looking at their phones. I mean, nobody was talking. It was all quiet as everybody was reading their phones. And we've gotten so inward that we don't think of that community. So I think there's a hunger, but I think people are afraid of it too. Well, I remember at Concordia one night, I used to go in the dining hall and eat with students in the evening. And two guys that were normally very talkative were just sitting there totally quiet. And I found out later that they were having a big fight on their phones under the table. I mean, okay, you're sitting at the same table, but you can't talk to each other, So Northumbria really emphasizes that coming together and being supportive community to one another. And a group, I've not been through a 12-step program, but I know many people who have. And every Saturday morning, one of my neighbors comes over and we're reading a book together and discussing it on 12-step spirituality, breathing underwater. Nina, if you've read that book. And there's a vulnerability in the 12-step program that I think could be a real gift, and it's kind of a Northumbrian kind of experience. Well, as the Northumbrian people, they have this saying, pray as you can, not as you can't, which I still am unpacking. But they have three approaches to prayer, and all of them are around authenticity, to be an authentic person before God, and not to pray through forms, but from the heart. Now, the forms can be from the heart, but there's three ways that they live out prayer. Liturgical prayer in the Northumbrian community. The idea is certain times a day that the church is praying worldwide morning prayer. As the sun keeps rising, morning prayer is prayed, midday prayer, and evening prayer. So the liturgical prayers, which by the way are in the Lutheran hymnal that we have in our pews out there, so one can have them at home. Monday night I pray on Zoom with my deacon community, and Wednesday night I meet on Zoom with a friend, and we pray Compline, the prayer before going to bed. So Zoom gives us an opportunity. I spoke with somebody yesterday when his grandmother died. The whole family was on Zoom, connected with her room, and they had prayers of commendation as she was dying,
Mhm.
so they could all be a part of it. But that liturgical prayer becomes very important. Then intercessory prayer is something that's a part. And at Northumbria, there's, and we do this at where I'm currently serving as chaplain, a box of prayer requests, and people throw things in, and people can come in and take out a request and just begin praying for that person. And then when you're done praying, you throw it back in the box for somebody else to come in and pray. But prayers of intercession for other people. And then finally, contemplative prayer, which is the quiet prayer before God, which we spend a lot of time on in this setting. But all three are important. And I think that's what Northumbria would emphasize. All three are important. The liturgical prayer, I do better with liturgical prayer when I'm in with people. I'm not real good at praying it by myself. So that's why Monday night and Wednesday night, I'm on Zoom in community. It'd certainly be nice to have that face to face, but you do what you do. So, this is part of that whole community. Northumbria, I spent 2 weeks in Taizé in France as a community, which was very similar to what Northumbria is about, except Taizé is a gathered community. Northumbria, I think there's maybe 4 or 5 people at the so-called mother house. Everything else is dispersed throughout the world. And it's a commitment that you make to the community to be a part of it. Okay, that's as much as I can dump in this amount of time. Thoughts, questions? What excites you? What scares you? What entices you? What makes you go, no way? Yes, it's very much a combined, because they don't live in community. And so men and women together are part of the Northumbrian experience. Good observation. Although even monastic communities now, like St. John's is all men, but down the road is St. Ben's and all women, and they get together for lots of different things. And at Taizé, there is a women's community right alongside the men's community. So they're separate, but not completely separate. And in fact, I went to a workshop one time about how clutter keeps us from being available. And my office at the time was more than cluttered. It kind of looked like that picture that we had this morning. Stacks of paper everywhere. When I'm doing that, I'm not available. And so I learned that hospitality is having a space that is free of clutter. So availability is an attitude, it's a way of life, it's being a safe person for those whom you encounter. I think you all heard about my Taco Bell experience. Oh, I went to Taco Bell one night, and I never go in, I always just drive through, but that night I went in, and 4 young adult men came in, and they were being young adult men, a little noisy. So the cantankerous me is going, shut up, And then next to me, they started talking about the influence of Indo-European language on the Appalachian population and other accents in the United States. I'm going, what? So I listened to that for a while, and I thought, okay, here I go, and here Vicky is availability. I walked over to their table and I said, guys, I'm blatantly eavesdropping on your conversation, and I am fascinated. And so they invited me to sit down, and we talked for at least 2 hours. And finally, I'm the one that said, I gotta go. But they still text me. We haven't gotten together since then, but that connection, just by my being available in Taco Bell, which taught me a huge thing about availability. So I someday would love to go to Northumbria, but I'm not sure physically I can hold that up these days. But it, you know, supposedly and the pictures make it look really nice, so. They welcome retreat groups if we want to go there on retreat. So anyway, that's Northumbria. We have 1 minute before. I think it's a very small rural. They've got a website. That's where I pulled a lot of this stuff, because these are two books that I really like. A Celtic Model of Ministry, which points out, how different, because the Romans never made it to Ireland. And so Celtic Christianity was not Romanized. It's its own organic, you know, even the Roman Catholic Church there is very different. But what I really like is this prayer book from the Northumbria community called Celtic Daily Prayer. And it has in it liturgies for every day, readings for every day of the year, that is prayed by the Northumbrian people. And so you're connected to this prayer book, kind of like the Book of Common Prayer. It unites the Northumbrian community. So this book, I'm sure it's on Amazon. I've had this for a long time. Like I say, I learned a lot from my students, and this is one of the things that I was introduced to. So, hey, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you.